Well, last week in our time together, we were looking at Jesus's one of his manifestations of himself to his disciples. And it was more than a week after his resurrection. It was up in the Sea of Galilee. Very, very early in the morning. The sun just coming up and still dark. And the disciples had fished all night, and he was on the seashore, and they were 100 yards out in their boats. And in the very early morning hours, he calls out to them, "Children, do you have any fish?" Knowing that they didn't. And the Greek shows that he was expecting a negative reply because he knew they didn't have any fish. It's a good thing the disciples didn't lie to him, right? No, we didn't catch a thing. And he tells them, well, cast your net on the right side of the boat and you'll find a catch. And they do that, surprisingly. The 7 of them, and sure enough, there's an incredible catch. And so this morning we are going to pick up on Jesus particularly addressing Peter. But we got to come back to the story because John is the first to understand who it is on the shore as they cast that net and they begin to pull it in, and John recognizes that the net is loaded with fish. And he says to Peter, "Peter, it's the Lord." There are some fascinating things going on in this story. And you got to understand the one who is writing the story of your life and my life is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Now listen to me. He doesn't waste anything in our lives. All the experiences that you and I go through, if we allow Him, He will work powerfully in making Himself literally shine from our lives. God is involved in the details. And I do mean the details. And so what we see in this story, I want you to picture this probably cool April morning as the sun hasn't even broken over the hills. Peter, after hearing what John says, puts on his robe, dives into the water, and swims 100 yards with that robe on to get to Jesus. Now, Jesus sets up some things. And so this morning, we're going to pick up here in chapter 21. Because Jesus had already made a charcoal fire. He had already had fish cooking on it. He already had bread there also for the disciples. And it's kind of interesting what he says to Peter after the other disciples arrive on the shore. And he says, "Hey guys, why don't you bring some of the fish that you caught and we'll put some more fish on the fire, on the charcoal." And so that's who does what? Remember the story? So when Jesus says, "Hey, why don't you bring some more fish?" all the disciples gathered around the boat, waded into the water, grabbed the net, and all of them pulled the net up onto the shore. No. Good. Who did it by himself? Peter. Don't miss Peter's love for Jesus. He's the only disciple that dives into the water and swims 100 yards. He wasn't going to wait for those guys to row the boat along with the fish to shore. He dives in. And you can rest assured he swam with his whole heart to get to Jesus. And when Jesus says, hey, will you guys get some other fish? Peter's the one who runs to the net, wades out into the water, grabs that net, and he's the only one who drags it on the shore with all his strength, with all his heart, at the Lord asking him to bring some extra fish. Do you see this man's heart? Do you see his quick response and his love for Christ as soon as Christ asks him for some extra fish? So we go on to read this in verse 12. Jesus said to them, hey, come and have breakfast. None of the disciples ventured to question him, who are you? Knowing that it was the Lord. And Jesus came and he took the bread and he gave it to them. And the fish, likewise. This is now the third time that Jesus was manifested to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. So when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, tend my lambs. And Jesus said to Simon a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, shepherd my sheep. So Jesus said to Peter the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Well, Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And Peter said to Jesus, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, tend my sheep. I hope there were questions that you were asking the Lord as you read the Word. Always ask questions. Question after question after question while you're reading. Lord, what does this mean? This is the second part of Bible study. You do observation, and then you do interpretation. Observation will answer the questions who, what, when, where, why, and how. So you ask all these questions. Interpretation is basically, what did it mean to the original audience? And you ask a ton of questions in that process too of interpretation and what it meant to the original audience. What is going on here in this culture, in this setting, in this context? And then will come the application. How did it apply to those who were being ministered to by the Word? And then how does it apply to you today? Ask, ask, ask. So I'm trusting that you asked the first question. None of his disciples ventured to question him. There's 7 of them. Do you get the picture on this cold morning? Very early, with the charcoal fire burning, and I'm sure that Peter would really enjoy that charcoal fire after diving into the water and being soaked. And just as Jesus would always do, I almost want to put, Jesus came and took the bread and broke it. Because that's what you read in the other text, Jesus always breaking the bread and distributing among the disciples. And here is the Creator taking the bread and doing that very thing. Handing it out to the 7 disciples, probably going to do the same thing with the fish. I wonder, Lord, what'd you use for plates? Yeah, little things like that. You need to ask questions. Did Jesus have a flat stone that he pulled the hot fish onto one of the flat stones and handed the flat stone? I don't know. Good question, though.
Where'd the bread come from?
Yeah, where'd the bread come from? He baked it.
Where'd the flour come from?
Yeah. Well, the Creator has no problem of multiplying fish and loaves. And here's what the Lord is doing in all of this. He is stirring the disciples' reminders of the past. He is stirring their memories. They have been walking with Jesus for 3 years. And it all started on the Sea of Galilee. It all started in a fishing boat. It all started with a miraculous catch. And the story has come full circle with another incredible supernatural catch that the nets do not even break, as they did in the first catch. And so he serves them, and we're told that it's the 3rd time that Jesus manifested himself, made himself appear. What this word means in the Greek, and I've talked about this before, is that Jesus was there, they just couldn't see him. And at this time, he takes and he reveals his presence, but he's on the seashore now. He was already with them in the boat. He already knew they caught nothing. He was with them all night long in all their conversations and everything that they were doing. But now he makes himself visible to the disciples. This is the 3rd time. We talked about that last week. So when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, now, let's get the picture. Won't take these guys long to eat. So the sun is still maybe not risen above the hills. Keep in mind, Sea of Galilee is down in, was it 500 feet below sea level? And it's a cold morning. Peter, being drenched, is warming himself at the charcoal fire. He's trying to dry out. I don't think there's a whole lot of chatter going on by the look of the text. They're all sort of like, how do I respond to this one whom I saw unbelievably brutalized, scourged beyond recognition, hanging on the cross, and now he's alive. And what's going to stir his reminder, and John is the only one that uses this word charcoal fire, and there's only 2 times he mentions that it's a charcoal fire. Chapter 18 is another charcoal fire. And it was in Caiaphas, the high priest, it was in his courtyard, and it was when Jesus was arrested and taken to Caiaphas, and Caiaphas was to question him. Peter couldn't get into the courtyard, but John knew the high priest personally, and he even knew the slave girl here, who's standing guard, so to speak. And Peter's the one who goes and gets Peter, John is the one who goes and gets Peter so that he can come into the courtyard. And when he comes into the courtyard, the officers and some of the slaves or servants are standing there having made a charcoal fire, for it was cold, and they were warming themselves. Peter joins them, and slave girl goes, "Hey, aren't you one of them?" Peter goes, "Oh, not me. I don't know Jesus." The second time, "Surely you're one of them. Your speech gives you away. You're Galilean." "No, it wasn't me." 3 times he denies Christ. But do not miss, it states twice in the text in John chapter 18. Verse 25, the second time, Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. So it's a dark morning, and he's frozen. Now, he's already eaten. He's already been at the fire a little bit, but he's standing there and he's still warming himself, drying out. And I imagine it was, you ever sit at a dinner where it's all you hear is the silverware hitting the plate? Probably one of those deals, and after they've all finished eating, or at the end of eating breakfast, Jesus breaks the silence. And look what he says. "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" And Peter said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." "Do you love me more than these?" What are the these? What do you think? Huh?
Warmth and food.
Warmth and food, okay. "Do you love me more than these?" What? The other disciples, "Do you love me more than your friends?" Okay. Most pick friends, fellow disciples. "Do you love me more than your friends, Peter? Than your fellow disciples?" Some say, "Do you love me more than these fish and your fishing business, your career?" "Peter, do you love me more than these?" I think it's actually the third. "Do you love me more than the other disciples love me?" What? Let that sink in. Peter, do you love me more than your friends love me? Why would Jesus ask such a penetrating question? Well, John... Well, that's true. That's how Peter is going to die. Yeah. Okay. Here's what we have to see and understand in this picture. And that's good, Debbie. That's good thinking. What is going on in this picture? It is not Jesus forgiving Peter, okay? Jesus has already forgiven Peter. Peter has already forgiven himself, and he's already confessed his shortcoming to the Lord. Listen, no guy who didn't believe that somebody that you denied 3 times, would dive into the water and swim 100 yards as fast as he could to get to Jesus if he didn't know he was already forgiven, right? No way would somebody obey like Peter did and run into the water and grab the net and pull it up on the land. All that shows is that Peter had already met with Jesus, as we're told in the Gospel of Luke, on that resurrection day, and he reassured Peter of his forgiveness. So what's going on in this text is not forgiveness that is being extended, but it's restoration to leadership that's being extended. Peter denied Jesus publicly 3 times. Now, so to speak, publicly, with 6 disciples watching, he's being restored as the leader of the 12 and as the leader of the church. This is what's going on. But the question is a penetrating question. It is a condemning question in that, do you love me more than the other disciples love me? And it's because of Peter's arrogance and because of Peter's boasting. In John 13:37, Peter said, Lord, why can I not follow you right now? I'll lay down my life for you. If everybody else forsakes you, I'm going to lay down my life for you. And Peter says in Matthew 26:33, even though all may fall away because of you, I will never fall away. I will stay faithful to you till death. Oh, really? Well, that arrogance, that pride, doesn't go with Jesus and a leader. He comes after Peter to restore him, but he hits him right between the eyes with his pride. And he states this, do you love me more than these? Notice how Peter skirts the answer. Let's go back and look at the text. He skirts the answer. And he says, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He forgot the these part, didn't he? And he said, oh, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Oh, okay. So then what transpires? There's some things going on here in the Greek. With the 2 words, the 2 Greek words that we translate love, agape and phileo. Now some will, and this is true of other gospel writers, but it's not true of John. Agape will show the unconditional love of God. It's a strong, unfailing love, agape. It's tied right in with the Hebrew word hesed, meaning loyal love or loyal kindness in the Old Testament. Phileo is where we get Philadelphia, the the city of brotherly shove, as I always say, rather than brotherly love. So phileo means brother. It's a brother love. And there would be more emotion involved in phileo. Now, so what's going on here is some will say there's a difference going on here because Jesus is going to use agape twice and then phileo. In other words, he's going to dumb it down, the love, when he asks Peter 3 times, do you love me? But Peter every time uses the Greek word phileo in the text. Never does he use the word agape. And then right away they go, oh, now see what happened? Jesus started out with, Peter, do you love me with God's love? You love me with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And Jesus does it twice, and finally Peter never responds and says, yes, I agape you. Peter every time says, I phileo you, Lord. And then the Lord finally says the last time, okay, Peter, do you at least phileo me? Get that picture out of your mind. Okay? Don't listen to anybody that preaches this text that way. What you're going to see in the Gospel of John is that John mixes agape and phileo up all the time. He uses them interchangeably, and there is no specific idea carried with either Greek word for John. And he does this on purpose so that you do your homework. So in John 3:16, we see God's love for man, that God so agape the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Okay, but in John 16:27, it says the Father himself loves you, phileo. Okay? The world. Used interchangeably. Agape and phileo of God's love for mankind in general. The Father's love for the Son, John 3:35, John writes that the Father loves the Son, agapes the Son, and has given all things into his hand. But in John 5:20, it says the Father phileos the Son and shows him all things that he himself is doing. Notice, John's using both words interchangeably. Notice the Christian's love for Jesus and for one another. Phileo in John 16:27, the Father himself loves you. Okay? And because you have loved me, phileo. But then John 13:34, you got the word agape. A new commandment I give to you, that you agape one another. Even as I have agape you are to agape one another. Used interchangeably. Unsaved people's love for one another and for the darkness. John 15 says, if you were of the world, the unsaved, the world would love its own. The world would phileo its own. The unsaved love their own. But in John 3:19, this is the judgment that light has come into the world, and men agape the darkness rather than the light. That they love sin and the whole world system rather than the light. Used interchangeably. And so all through the account, phileo and agape are used interchangeably, and I want to say that this does not have any bearing on what Jesus is saying to Peter. None whatsoever. Just because Jesus uses agape twice doesn't mean he's saying something special. He's just asking. Now, this is a crazy question to ask somebody. Do you love me? Three times. Because of Peter denying Christ 3 times, because of Peter and his boasting about loving Jesus more than others, Jesus, this is a crazy way to restore somebody to leadership. Do you know what he's doing with the charcoal fire? Do you know what he's doing with the catch of fish? Do you know what he's doing by the 3 questions? He is reminding Peter of his sin. And then you have to say, why? Lord, why would you do that? You know what else he's going to tell Peter right after this? He's going to say, oh yeah, and by the way, they're going to bind you and lead you where you don't want to go. You're going to die a martyr's death. Whoopee! What a way to be the leader for the church. Yeah, ram it to me, Jesus. Convict me of my sin and then tell me I'm going to die for you. What a wonderful way to be reinstated, huh? Wouldn't you like that? We're going to give you a new position at work. We're going to reduce your pay, and then we're going to take and beat the crap out of you, and then we're going to fire you. Woo-hoo! What a way to go, huh? Seriously, think about it. God's ways are not my ways. God's ways are not your ways. God is convicting Peter in a powerful way. And he states to Peter, he says, listen, Peter, he says, I want you to tend my lambs. In other words, feed my little ones. And then I want you to shepherd my sheep. And that has the idea of protecting the sheep, of leading the sheep, of providing for the sheep. And then he says, I want you to feed my sheep. I want you to feed the lambs, the new believers. I want you to feed the mature believers spiritually with the word. And everything I've taught you, pass it on. And I want you to shepherd. I want you to protect them spiritually and physically, and I want you to guide them and in any way in their life that you can serve them, whether it's washing their feet, whether it's breaking the bread, whether it's feeding them, you do it. Follow my example. And they're all commands. They aren't saying, oh, Peter, well, I wish you would tend to my little lambs. I wish you would, feed my sheep. I wish you would shepherd my sheep. No, it's a command. Peter, do this. Shepherd the flock and other shepherds. First Peter himself writes about this. He says to the other shepherds, other believers who are leaders of the flock, he says, shepherd the flock of God among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but voluntarily, according to the will of God, and not for sordid gain, but with eagerness. God's looking for sincerity. In Acts 20, we read about Paul writing here, be on guard for yourselves and for all the flock, among which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers, pastors, to shepherd the church of God, which he purchased with his own blood. Now listen, there's movements all around us that pastors shouldn't be. All through the New Testament, you see pastors and the admonition to the pastors, to the elders, as a shepherd over the flock. Ephesians 4:11 says that he, Jesus, gave some as apostles, some as prophets, and some as evangelists, and some as pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints for the work of service and for the building up of the body of Christ. And so I just want to stress, pastors are biblical, pastors are necessary, but the pastor has to be called by God. The pastor must be mature and trained to handle the word properly. Not just any old guy leading the flock. Hey, I saw what you said when I made that comment, old. One of the things I think that we miss in the text is this, and this is extremely important. So Jesus is publicly restoring Peter. Does he ever call him Peter? It's crazy because at John 1:42, here's what happens. Andrew brought Simon Peter to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "Well, you're Simon, the son of John. You shall be called Cephas," which is translated Peter. There's only two places in the Bible where Peter is called Simon, son of John. John chapter 1 and John chapter 21. Jesus is the one who changed his name to Peter, and yet he won't use it when he's reinstating Peter. Why? Beth, you didn't underline Simon, son of John. That's okay. My secretary's slipping. Look what he says. Simon, son of John, do you love me? Oh my, Simon, son of John, do you love me? No, I said a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Susie, what's going on? Why is he not calling him Peter? This is extremely important. Now, he has just hammered Peter, and he has multiplied those fish, and he pulled them up on the shore, and he says, "Peter, do you remember the first miracle when I had the net overflowing with fish? Remember what you said to me then, Peter? Peter, you got on your knees in the boat and you said to me, 'I am a sinful man. Depart from me, O Lord.'" And Jesus is saying to Peter again, "Peter, come back to where you were 3 years earlier and get on your knees and confess that you are a sinful man, not worthy of my grace and my salvation." That's why he says, "Peter, do you love me?" 3 times. And in the text, on the 3rd time, it says Peter was grieved. He was full of sorrow because he had said to him the 3rd time, "Do you love me?" And look what Peter says. And Peter said to him, "Lord, you know all things. You're all-knowing." Now, he uses the word oida. You know intellectually everything. You know my thoughts. You know exactly my motives behind me saying, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And then he states, "You know that I love you." The second "no" is gnosko in the Greek. And he says to the Lord, "You know by my experience that I love you. I'm trying to prove my love to you in diving in the water, in pulling the net up onto the shore, and in responding to you in this intimacy at the fire." And he's learned his lesson. Never does Peter say, "Oh yeah, I love you more than the other guys right here. It's all me, Lord, I'm in." He has humbled himself and he says, "Lord, you know. You know by experience. Yes, I failed you, but you have forgiven me. And yes, I love you." Now, coming back to the 3 times, he says, Simon, son of John, please, if you walk out with anything, please don't forget this. Simon in the Hebrew means hearing. John means God is gracious. 3 times he says, listen, are you hearing me? God is gracious, I am God. Feed my sheep. Peter, listen, I am gracious. Shepherd my sheep. Peter, I am overwhelmingly gracious. Are you hearing me? Feed my sheep. You know what's crazy? Is John 21:7. When Peter jumped into the water, look at how John is led by the Spirit to record it. Therefore the disciple whom Jesus loved, which is John, said to Peter, it's the Lord. It's him on the seashore there. Look what happens. So when hearing heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and he dove himself into the water. So when hearing heard, Simon, you can hear with ears, and you can even register it into your mind, but you're not really hearing. You're not obeying. Peter was not that way. Hearing, he heard. He understood. He obeyed. But you know what Jesus does for you and me? He pulls up our past failures. And don't think for a moment that it's Satan. Satan will do it, yes. But Jesus will pull up your past failure, my past failure, spiritually. And it's for the purpose of taking and humbling you and me. The scriptures say that we ought not to think of ourselves more highly than we ought to think. Right? And don't you and I are commanded not to realize, I should say, is that we too once were foolish and deceived. And don't you dare think that you're better than somebody that's lost. And so when we come to the communion table, if this communion table will mean nothing to you if you don't see your sinfulness. Amen? It'll mean nothing. Because believe it or not, the reminder of our sinfulness, and now that we have no sin, God sees us as holy. But the reminder of our sinfulness is that God is incredibly gracious, isn't He? That He would see our sin no more. I think when we look at the nail prints on Jesus' hands and on His feet, do you know what we see? Not His sinfulness, We see our sinfulness. It's our sins that nailed him to the cross. And this is a crazy way in which the Creator brings Peter to his knees again in his sinfulness, saying, Peter, I want you back on your knees. You are not any better than any of the other disciples, even though I'm calling you to shepherd all the sheep. Whoa. And he says, you better see yourself as the shepherd, as the servant, as the humble sinner ministering to the flock. What stands true for me stands true for all of us, doesn't it? Because we're to minister to one another in humility, in love. Man, we all have some crazy quirks. All you got to do is just hang around Susie for a while and you'll see lots of hers, okay? You know what? That is where forgiveness comes in, and compassion. And there's things that you just let, you don't have to always point out a person's failures. They know. Okay? Love them. Man, if God was pointing out our sin all the time, we'd be beat up all the time, wouldn't we? Come on, be honest. Thank God for that blood that continually cleanses us. One last thing, and then we'll take communion together. Unconfessed sin will destroy you. It'll eat you alive like it did David when he tried to hide the murder of Uriah and adultery with Bathsheba. Until Nathan the prophet confronted him. It'll eat you alive. It will destroy you. It made David really, really sick. Like the fervent heat of summer. He said he was like a potsherd. All his life and vitality was sucked out of him. But once he confessed, he was set free. Restored intimacy with the Lord. Yeah, there were still consequences to pay. And so what the Lord does is He convicts you and me. He's tapping on your mind. Hopefully it's something that you've already confessed and you're not allowing it to destroy your life. And you've been set free from the guilt. But if He's tapping on your heart and it's something that you haven't been set free from and it's destroying your life, whatever you do, don't take communion this morning. God said if we'll judge ourselves, we won't be judged by Him. So we need to take the cup in a worthy manner. It's a serious thing to do it in an unworthy manner. So don't think for a moment that God's not going to bring back even the sin from 40 years ago in my own personal life. And I remember it clearly. But I've confessed it, I've forsaken it, I've been set free from it. But I'm telling you, it keeps me humble. Oh, do I wrestle with pride? You better believe it. But when I remember where I was and where I am now by God's grace, it helps me to effectively minister to you and to those who are way out in left field. And without that, we won't be effective in helping each other or reaching the lost. We've got to remember where we were without Jesus. So as we come to celebrate communion, we're going to take and we're going to pass the bread first. Hold on to it. And then we'll all take it together. And then we'll distribute the cup. And we'll take that together. And then we'll close with a song. I know I went long today, but I think that this is extremely important. And I really believe that the Lord was tapping on hearts this morning. Do not forget hearing. Jesus says, hearing. I am gracious. Hear me, Peter. I am extremely gracious. I have restored you publicly. Feed my sheep. Norm, Doug.